The following presentation is intended strictly for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute professional financial, academic, career, legal, or tax advice. The landscape of higher education funding, including scholarships, grants, and federal financial aid, is highly dynamic and subject to frequent changes based on institutional policies, private foundation rules, and federal regulations. Any strategies, historical trends, or case studies discussed in this video are not a promise of future results. There are no guaranteed outcomes when applying for scholarships or financial aid. Securing educational funding requires individual effort, specific qualifications, and often involves a highly competitive selection process. Viewers are strongly advised to conduct their own extensive due diligence, verify all deadlines, terms, and requirements directly with the granting organizations, and consult with certified high school guidance counselors, university financial aid officers, or professional financial advisors before making any significant decisions regarding college funding or taking on student loan debt. Do not rely solely on the information provided in this presentation to make financial or educational choices. Right now, there is a staggering $1.7 trillion student loan debt crisis quietly suffocating the American dream. Yet, simultaneously, over $100 million in scholarship money goes completely unclaimed every single year. Let that sink in for a moment. Students across the country are signing away their financial freedom at 18 years old, agreeing to decades of crushing, non-dischargeable debt, while literal fortunes sit in the bank accounts of private foundations, corporate sponsors, and university endowments simply because nobody bothered to apply correctly. We have been sold a massive generational lie about higher education in the United States. The pervasive myth is that you either need to be a generational genius with a flawless standardized test score, an Olympic-level athlete destined for national television, or independently wealthy to graduate from a four-year university without carrying the burden of massive debt. This is fundamentally false. Historical trends consistently show that the students who secure the most funding are rarely the ones with the absolute highest grade point averages. Instead, they are the ones who treat the scholarship application process not as a desperate, last-minute lottery ticket, but as a rigid, highly organized, and meticulously executed system. Consider a recent case study from a typical public high school in the Midwest. Imagine two students sitting in the exact same graduating class, applying to the exact same state university. Student A was the classic academic overachiever, a 3.9 grade point average, president of the debate club, and enrolled in 5 rigorous advanced placement classes. Student B was remarkably average on paper, a 3.2 grade point average, played junior varsity tennis, and worked part-time bagging groceries at a local supermarket. 4 years later, Student A graduated with $85,000 in high-interest student loans. Student B graduated completely debt-free, with a small surplus of funding left over for living expenses and textbook costs. How did this happen? It was not magic, and it certainly was not an accident. Student A applied to precisely 3 massive, nationally advertised scholarships, competing against hundreds of thousands of other top-tier applicants across the country, and ultimately relied entirely on the university's default, loan-heavy financial aid package. Student B, on the other hand, executed a methodical, localized, and highly strategic operational framework. They utilized a very specific, comprehensive checklist to identify, organize, and attack hyper-niche funding opportunities that Student A thought were beneath their academic standing. Student B won $1,000 from the local Rotary Club, $2,000 from a regional grocery workers union, and $500 from a highly specific essay contest about local county history. They strategically stacked these smaller, low-competition awards year after year, building a financial aid package entirely from the ground up. The critical difference between Student A and Student B was simply their approach to the process. Student B understood that winning scholarships is largely a numbers game heavily influenced by strategic organization and extreme attention to detail. But here is the terrifying reality for most families. The application process is purposefully convoluted. Between navigating the free application for federal student aid, interpreting the notoriously complex college scholarship service profile required by private institutions, tracking hundreds of disparate deadlines across multiple time zones, securing highly specific letters of recommendation from chronically busy educators, and writing dozens of unique personal statements tailored to different foundation missions, the system is practically designed to create administrative fatigue. The sheer friction of the process breaks most students before they even submit their first comprehensive application. They look at the mountain of required paperwork, They look at the staggering sticker price of tuition, room, and board, and they inevitably take the path of least resistance. They simply sign the federal and private loan documents. This is exactly what we are going to fix today. You are currently engaging with the ultimate, definitive masterclass on building a foolproof scholarship application system. In this comprehensive deep dive, I am going to walk you through the exact multi-layered checklist required to systematically dismantle the cost of higher education in the United States. We are moving far away from vague, unhelpful platitudes like "just apply for everything," and moving directly into actionable high-level strategy. This is not a superficial overview or a list of basic tips. We are going to examine the entire life cycle of a successful scholarship application campaign, breaking down what historically successful applicants do differently at every single stage of the funding process. We will comprehensively cover how to conduct a deep audit of your own personal profile to uncover hidden, hyper-niche scholarship categories you never realized you were qualified for, moving beyond basic merit and need-based aid into demographic-specific, geographic-specific, and major-specific funding pools. We are going to explore the psychological triggers that scholarship selection committees actively look for when reading personal statements, allowing you to craft compelling, narrative-driven essays that immediately stand out in a pile of thousands of generic submissions. I am going to show you exactly how to build an impenetrable organizational system that meticulously tracks deadlines, manages required supplementary documents, and completely eliminates the late-night panic of a missed digital submission window. Furthermore, we will dissect how to strategically approach your recommenders so that your letters of recommendation are not just generic, lukewarm endorsements, but powerful, highly targeted character references that align perfectly with the specific philanthropic goals of the foundation offering the money. Whether you are a high school junior just beginning to look at college tours and feeling overwhelmed by the impending costs, a high school senior staring down the barrel of immediate tuition bills and housing deposits, or a current college student realizing that your existing financial aid package is simply not robust enough to cover the rising year-over-year cost of living and tuition inflation, this masterclass checklist is designed to completely reframe your approach. By the time we conclude this deep dive, you will no longer look at scholarships as an intimidating, impossible lottery reserved for a select few. Instead, you will possess a clear step-by-step roadmap based on proven historical trends. You will understand how to bypass the hyper-competitive national awards that offer a low probability of success, and instead focus your finite time and energy where the potential outcomes and return on your investment are the highest. You will learn how to systematically categorize your applications, how to recycle core essay components effectively without sounding repetitive, how to handle the inevitable rejections without losing your operational momentum, and how to consistently position yourself as the undeniable solution to the problem the scholarship committee is trying to solve. You are about to learn the exact mechanics of educational funding that traditional high schools simply do not have the time, bandwidth, or specialized resources to teach. Step 1 of our ultimate operational checklist begins before you ever open a single application portal or draft a single introductory paragraph. We must completely dismantle the way you view yourself as an applicant through what is known in the educational consulting space as a comprehensive personal inventory audit. The biggest mistake 99% of high school seniors make in the year 2026 is positioning themselves as a generalist. They sit down at their computer, type scholarships for high school seniors into a search engine, and proceed to waste dozens of hours applying to massive, nationally syndicated corporate sweepstakes. These are the heavily marketed, highly visible portals where the historical trends dictate a mathematical probability of winning that rivals a state lottery. You are competing against 300,000 other, incredibly qualified students for 10 available slots. This spray and pray method is the exact reason why families become universally frustrated and ultimately surrender to taking out massive federal and private student loans. To fundamentally change your potential outcomes, you must pivot away from the national bloodbath and execute a strategy of extreme micro-targeting. You need to stop thinking of yourself as a student looking for money and start viewing your entire existence as a highly specific matrix of demographic, geographic, and historical data points. Every single attribute of your life, your parents' lives, and even your grandparents' lives is a potential unlocking mechanism for highly localized, hyper-niche funding pools. Let us look at a specific case study to illustrate this mechanical shift. Consider a student named Sarah Jenkins navigating the application cycle right now in 2026. Sarah was an entirely average student residing in a mid-sized suburb in Pennsylvania. Initially, Sarah attempted to compete in the national arenas and received zero funding. She was entirely demoralized until she executed a rigorous personal inventory audit. She sat down with her parents and mapped out every single organizational affiliation tied to her family tree. She discovered that her father was a member of a local regional trade union, her mother banked with a highly localized community credit union rather than a national conglomerate, her grandfather was a veteran of a specific military conflict, and she herself had a documented history of asthma. Furthermore, she lived in a specific county that had a dedicated community foundation funded by legacy wealth from the local industrial era. By cross-referencing these incredibly specific data points, Sarah completely abandoned the national application circuit. Instead, she submitted highly targeted applications to the Trade Union Leadership Council, the board of directors at the Community Credit Union, a regional veterans auxiliary group, an allergy and asthma advocacy nonprofit operating in her state, and the localized county foundation. The potential outcomes shifted dramatically in her favor because she was no longer competing against 300,000 generalists. In several of these micropools, historical trends suggest she was likely one of fewer than 20 total applicants. Sarah secured over $14,000 in cumulative first-year funding without possessing a single extraordinary academic metric, simply because she understood the power of the personal inventory audit. To execute this step on your own checklist, you must become a forensic investigator of your own life. You will sit down with a blank document and begin meticulously categorizing your unique attributes. Begin with geography. Do not simply look for scholarships in your state. You must drill down into your specific county, your specific city, your specific school district, and even your specific zip code. Local chambers of commerce, Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, and regional business associations consistently allocate annual operating budgets toward community enrichment, which almost always includes educational grants for graduating seniors in their immediate vicinity. Imagine if you are the owner of a successful mid-sized logistics company in Ohio. When you establish a $5,000 corporate scholarship, you are not looking to fund a student 3 states away. You want to fund a local student whose family might do business with your company, creating hyperlocal community goodwill and positive public relations within your specific market. This is the exact psychology of the local donor, and you must exploit this dynamic by exhausting every single geographical advantage you possess. Next, you must aggressively audit your familial and corporate affiliations. Every single place of employment connected to your household must be investigated. Do your parents work for a major corporation with a hidden educational foundation? Do they work for a small business that is part of a larger regional coalition? Are they members of any fraternal organizations, professional licensing boards, or labor unions? Even consumer habits matter. The financial institution where your family holds their primary checking account, especially if it is a credit union or a regional bank, is a prime target for non-competitive funding. Furthermore, you must deeply analyze your intended major and career trajectory. Do not just look for engineering scholarships. If you want to study engineering, drill down into mechanical engineering, then down into sustainable aerospace manufacturing. The more niche your intended professional focus, the smaller the applicant pool becomes. Professional associations representing highly specific industries are terrified of aging workforces and actively deploy capital to incentivize young talent to enter their specific sector. They desperately want to give this money away to students who demonstrate a genuine, highly articulate interest in their niche field. You must also ruthlessly document every single hobby, extracurricular activity, and personal hurdle. Have you spent 4 years volunteering at an animal shelter? There are private endowments explicitly dedicated to funding students entering veterinary sciences or animal welfare advocacy. Are you a first-generation college student? Are you navigating a specific learning disability or a unique medical challenge? There are hundreds of advocacy groups and private trusts designed to support these exact demographics, but they will never come looking for you. You have to uncover them through this exhaustive auditing process. The goal of this initial phase of the ultimate checklist is to generate a master list of at least 50 to 75 hyper-specific, low-competition funding opportunities where your personal data matrix aligns perfectly with the foundational mission of the donor. This deep audit fundamentally changes the mathematics of higher education funding. If you rely solely on the financial aid package generated by the free application for federal student aid, you are subjecting yourself to a rigid federal algorithm that almost universally overestimates a family's ability to pay out of pocket. By building your own localized funding stack through the personal inventory audit, you are taking absolute control of your financial destiny. However, Generating a list of 75 highly targeted scholarships introduces a massive, secondary problem that destroys 90% of applicants before the deadline ever arrives. You are suddenly faced with navigating 75 different application portals, 75 unique due dates scattered across an 8-month timeline, 75 different essay prompts, and a mountain of required supplementary documentation that must be perfectly organized. The administrative friction at this stage is absolutely catastrophic for a disorganized student. If you do not have a ruthless, impenetrable system for managing this incoming tidal wave of logistical requirements, your entire master list will collapse under the weight of missed deadlines and incomplete submissions. So how do the most successful debt-free students in the country manage this exact logistical nightmare without losing their minds or dropping the ball on a $5,000 opportunity? That is exactly what we have to build next. The answer to that logistical nightmare is the construction of a centralized, impenetrable command center. We are talking about building a custom digital infrastructure that completely removes human memory from the equation. The human brain is exceptionally skilled at generating ideas and writing compelling narratives, but it is fundamentally terrible at remembering 75 disparate deadlines scattered across 9 months and 4 different time zones. Relying on mental notes, physical planners, or disorganized sticky notes on your bedroom wall is a mathematical guarantee of failure in the modern financial aid landscape. To understand the severity of this, we need to examine a devastating case study from the current 2026 application cycle. Consider a highly motivated student named Michael Chun. Michael had executed the personal inventory audit flawlessly. He identified a $4,000 engineering grant offered by a specialized aerospace manufacturing consortium that perfectly matched his profile. He spent 3 weeks refining his application. However, Michael tracked his deadlines using a basic calendar app on his phone and failed to account for a critical operational detail. He lived in Ohio, operating on Eastern Standard Time. The consortium was headquartered in Seattle, Washington, operating on Pacific Standard Time. The deadline was listed strictly as 5 in the afternoon. Because Michael lacked a rigorous tracking matrix, he assumed the deadline was local to his time zone. He attempted to submit his application at 4:30 in the afternoon Eastern Time, only to discover the portal had completely locked him out. He missed a $4,000 opportunity simply because he failed to build a system that accounted for geographic time variations. To ensure you never replicate Michael's critical error, we are going to build your operational framework right now, step by step. The very first component you must establish is a dedicated, entirely isolated professional email address. In the year 2026, utilizing a school-issued email address is a catastrophic operational risk. High school information technology departments employ highly aggressive, district-wide firewalls designed to protect students from external spam. These firewalls regularly intercept and permanently quarantine incoming emails from private scholarship foundations, especially those containing PDF attachments regarding interview requests or award notifications. Furthermore, when you graduate in May or June, your school district will inevitably deactivate that email account, completely severing your line of communication with organizations that may be trying to disperse funds to you in July or August. You must create a brand new email account strictly dedicated to higher education funding. Do not use an old childhood handle. The address must be a variation of your first and last name, projecting immediate professionalism to any foundation director who sees it in their inbox. This isolated inbox becomes your secure communication vault, completely free from retail marketing spam, social media notifications, and school-related clutter. Once your secure communication line is established, you must construct the master tracking matrix. This is not a casual list. It is a highly dynamic relational database built within a cloud-based spreadsheet program. You will create specific columns that leave absolutely no room for ambiguity. Column 1 is the exact name of the scholarship. Column 2 is the direct hyperlink to the application portal, ensuring you never waste time searching for the website again. Column 3 is the exact award amount, which allows you to prioritize your efforts based on potential outcomes and return on investment. Column 4 is the absolute most critical piece of data, the deadline. However, you will not just write the date. You will format this column to state the exact date, the exact minute, and the explicit time zone required by the donor. Column 5 will track the specific status of the application using strict data validation rules, categorizing every entry as either unstarted, drafting, waiting on recommenders, ready for review, or successfully submitted. Column 6 will act as your supplementary document checklist. explicitly noting if the foundation requires official transcripts, tax documents, or specific identification records. By utilizing conditional formatting, you can program this spreadsheet to automatically highlight rows in bright red when a deadline approaches within 14 days, creating a visual urgency system that forces you to take immediate action. The third pillar of your command center is the cloud-based filing cabinet. The desktop of your laptop cannot operate as a digital junkyard. If your files are scattered randomly across your hard drive, you will inevitably upload the wrong essay draft to the wrong portal. You must create a master folder in a secure cloud storage drive labeled with your graduation year and the word scholarship applications. Inside this master folder, you will create an individual subfolder for every single scholarship on your tracking matrix. Within those specific subfolders, you will maintain separate documents for your initial brainstorms, your rough drafts, and your final polished submissions. This brings us to a highly technical operational advantage regarding file naming conventions. Imagine if you are sitting on a corporate selection committee. You are tasked with reviewing 500 digital applications. You download 500 attached documents, and 490 of them are vaguely titled Final Essay.pdf or Scholarship Draft.docs. This creates massive administrative friction for the reviewer, who now has to open every single document just to figure out whose application they are reading. You must eliminate this friction by employing a rigid, standardized naming convention for every single file you submit. Every document must be titled with your last name and underscore your first name and underscore the specific name of the scholarship and the type of document it is. For example, Jenkins underscore Sarah underscore Rotary Club underscore personal statement.pdf. This microscopic attention to detail subconsciously signals to the selection committee that you are highly organized, remarkably professional, and distinctly capable of managing the funds they are preparing to award. Finally, your operational framework must include a mandatory 72-hour internal deadline protocol. Historical trends across digital application portals reveal a massive, predictable surge in server traffic during the final 24 hours before a major deadline. Tens of thousands of procrastinating students attempt to upload heavy PDF files and high-resolution multimedia attachments simultaneously, frequently causing the Foundation's legacy servers to completely crash. If the server goes down and you miss the midnight cutoff, the committee will not grant you an extension. They will simply evaluate the applications that were submitted on time. To completely insulate yourself from this technological catastrophe, your master tracking matrix must artificially shift every single official deadline exactly 3 days forward. If the Foundation states the application is due on November 15th, your internal operational system must treat November 12th as the absolute final moment of submission. By implementing this dedicated email architecture, the dynamic tracking matrix, the cloud-based filing hierarchy, and the artificial deadline protocol, you have successfully transformed yourself from a disorganized, reactive high school student into a highly efficient, proactive funding machine. You have entirely eliminated the logistical risks that cause the vast majority of your peers to abandon their applications halfway through the cycle. The Foundation has been poured, the command center is fully operational, and your target list is locked in. However, possessing a perfect tracking system and a list of hyper-niche opportunities is only half the battle. Now, you actually have to execute the deliverables. You have to open those portals and face the single most terrifying component of the entire higher education funding landscape. It is the one required document that paralyzes even the most confident students, causing them to stare at a blank screen for hours until they finally surrender to the anxiety and close their laptops. You must now learn how to engineer a deeply manipulative, narrative-driven document that triggers an immediate emotional response from a committee of complete strangers. You have to write the personal statement essay. The personal statement essay is the silent graveyard of thousands of highly qualified applicants every single year. Most students navigating the system in 2026 completely misunderstand the fundamental psychological purpose of this heavily weighted document. They treat the essay like a basic prose version of their high school resume. They dedicate 500 words to chronologically listing every single extracurricular club they ever joined, every minor academic award they won, and every single volunteer hour they logged, operating under the deeply flawed assumption that the sheer volume of their accomplishments will bludgeon the selection committee into awarding them a substantial check. This is a catastrophic strategic error. The committee already possesses your formal resume. They already possess your official transcripts. Restating data metrics that they have already thoroughly reviewed is a massive, unforgivable waste of their incredibly finite attention span. The personal statement is not a dry information delivery system. It is a highly calculated emotional persuasion mechanism. It is your absolute only opportunity to fundamentally transform yourself from a flat, two-dimensional set of academic statistics into a living, breathing, compelling human being who is actively navigating a complex world and overcoming legitimate obstacles. Imagine if you are sitting on the selection board for a prominent regional foundation. It is 11 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. You have just worked a full 8-hour shift at your primary corporate job. You have navigated the evening traffic, you have fed your family, and now you are volunteering your extremely limited free time to read your 80th application essay of the evening. If the very first sentence of that 81st essay begins with the phrase, "Ever since I was a little boy I have always loved science," your brain immediately and subconsciously disengages. You have read that exact same uninspired opening line 40 different times in the past 3 days alone. It is boring, it is entirely predictable, and it instantly signals to the reviewer that the applicant lacks basic narrative creativity. To survive this highly competitive and fatiguing selection process, your opening paragraph must act as a psychological pattern interrupt. Historical trends among winning submissions consistently show a heavy reliance on a powerful literary technique, known as in media res, which translates to starting directly in the middle of the action. You must drop the tired reader straight into a high-stakes moment, a profound realization, or a specific sensory-rich memory that immediately demands their undivided attention and forces them to keep reading. Let us examine a concrete case study from the current 2026 application landscape, involving a high school senior named David Miller. David was applying for a highly competitive, lucrative regional scholarship focused entirely on community leadership and grassroots civic engagement. In his initial rough draft, David started his essay by plainly stating that he was the acting president of the student council, and that he recently organized a local park cleanup because he deeply cared about the environment. It was factually accurate, but it was incredibly dry and easily forgettable. After fundamentally restructuring his narrative approach to align with professional copywriting frameworks, David rewrote his entire introduction, utilizing the in media residential technique. His final winning submission opened with a hyper-specific, highly visual scene. He described standing ankle-deep in freezing, contaminated mud at 6 in the morning, desperately holding a torn, low-quality trash bag that was actively spilling hazardous debris back into the local community river, while 20 exhausted underclassmen stared at him in the freezing rain waiting for an immediate leadership solution. In exactly 2 sentences, David established severe conflict, a harsh environment, a heavy burden of responsibility, and the urgent, immediate need for dynamic leadership. The exhausted reviewer reading that essay at 11 o'clock at night is instantly awake. They are suddenly invested in the gritty reality of the story. They desperately want to know exactly how David handled the broken trash bag, the freezing mud, and the expectations of his peers. He has successfully hooked his audience by treating his application like a cinematic opening scene, rather than a cover letter. Once you have successfully secured the reader's attention with a deeply compelling narrative hook, you must seamlessly execute the second crucial phase of the essay structure, which is the pivot. The pivot is the exact moment where you transition from your engaging personal story directly into the core foundational mission statement of the scholarship provider itself. This is where most capable students fundamentally fail the execution because they write a beautiful, heartwarming story about their own lives, but they completely forget to connect it back to the specific people holding the checkbook. You have to remember at all times that philanthropic organizations do not distribute vast sums of money out of sheer, blind benevolence. They give away targeted money to solve a highly specific societal problem or to advance a deeply held organizational worldview. If you are applying for a scholarship funded by a local coalition of commercial architects, your essay cannot just be a sweet story about building a wooden birdhouse with your grandfather in the garage. You must aggressively pivot that exact story to demonstrate how that early, formative experience with rudimentary construction ignited a lifelong obsession with structural integrity, which ultimately led you to pursue a rigorous degree in architecture so you can design sustainable, affordable housing for your specific underserved local community. You must explicitly and undeniably align your past childhood experiences with their future philanthropic objectives. You are essentially telling the committee, without using these exact words, that you are the living human embodiment of their corporate mission statement. This crucial pivot brings us directly to the third and final structural component of a winning personal statement, which is the psychological concept of future pacing. Future pacing is a highly effective, advanced persuasion strategy where you force the reader to vividly and clearly imagine you succeeding in the very near future, specifically and exclusively because of their financial intervention. The Scholarship Selection Committee desperately needs to see a massive potential return on their monetary investment. They are highly motivated to fund undeniable winners who will make their foundation look brilliant in retrospect. Therefore, the conclusion of your essay must paint a crystal clear, highly operational picture of your precise academic and professional trajectory. Do not ever end your essay by simply saying you hope to go to a good college and eventually make a positive difference in the world. That language is entirely too vague and highly forgettable. Instead, you must explicitly detail your operational timeline. State clearly that you intend to graduate in exactly 4 years with a specific Bachelor of Science degree. Leverage that highly specialized education to secure a targeted position within a specific regional industry, and eventually return to your local zip code to implement a specific community program or solve a specific, quantifiable local issue. You want the committee to feel an overwhelming sense of urgency, excitement, and almost a fear of missing out on your potential. You want them to look at your application and actively believe that if they do not fund your education right now, they are actively hindering a brilliant, highly driven mind from solving a massive societal problem. When you seamlessly combine the in-media residential narrative hook, the strategic pivot to align with the Foundation's core mission, and the powerful psychological impact of future pacing, you elevate your personal statement from a generic academic requirement into a highly persuasive piece of professional marketing material. You are no longer acting like a desperate student asking for a financial handout. You are actively pitching yourself as a high-yield philanthropic investment. You are utilizing the exact same persuasive communication frameworks that successful technology startup founders used to raise millions in venture capital. However, achieving this level of narrative precision requires intense, meticulous, and ruthless editing. You cannot write a sloppy first draft on a Sunday night and submit it on a Monday morning expecting a high-yield return. Historical trends dictate that the most financially successful, debt-free applicants push their core essays through a minimum of 4 distinct, aggressive revision cycles. They read their essays out loud over and over again to identify clunky phrasing. They strip out every single unnecessary adjective and adverb to ensure rapid, breathless pacing, and they relentlessly interrogate every single sentence to ensure it actively serves the overarching narrative arc. They eliminate passive voice entirely, replacing weak, hesitant verbs with strong, actionable language that projects absolute confidence and quiet authority. Now, as you absorb this incredibly dense breakdown of narrative engineering, you might be realizing the massive, intimidating amount of sheer effort required to craft just one of these highly optimized personal statements. If you recall our previous operational checklist from the personal inventory audit, we established a strict goal of applying to a minimum of 75 micro-targeted scholarships to mathematically maximize your potential outcomes. If you sit down right now and attempt to write 75 completely unique, highly polished, narrative-driven essays entirely from scratch, you will inevitably experience catastrophic mental burnout by the second week of October. You will completely exhaust your creative bandwidth, your high school grades will inevitably suffer from the time deficit, and your entire application system will completely derail before the winter deadlines even arrive. This is the exact moment where the vast majority of highly ambitious students hit a massive brick wall, surrender to the friction, and simply give up on free funding. They simply cannot sustain the sheer volume of creative output required to win this massive numbers game. But what if I told you that the most successful, fully funded applicants in the country almost never write more than 3 core essays during their entire senior year? What if there was a highly mechanical, perfectly ethical copy and paste methodology that allows you to take one perfectly engineered master story and safely manipulate it to fit dozens of radically different scholarship prompts without the selection committee ever realizing it? That highly guarded, massive time-saving strategy is the holy grail of scholarship execution, and that modular framework is exactly what we are going to dismantle next. The sheer mathematical reality of attempting to write 75 entirely distinct, deeply emotional, and perfectly grammatically structured essays during the first semester of your senior year in 2026 is a recipe for absolute academic self-destruction. The friction is simply too high. However, when you analyze historical trends across thousands of successful scholarship applications, a glaringly obvious pattern emerges. Almost every single scholarship prompt in the United States, regardless of the private foundation or the corporate sponsor behind it, is fundamentally asking one of 3 overarching questions disguised under slightly different phrasing. They are either asking you to describe a time you failed and overcame severe personal or academic adversity. They are asking you to detail a specific instance where you demonstrated exceptional leadership and community impact. Or they are asking you to articulate your specific future vision and explain exactly why you have chosen your intended academic field. Once you recognize this universal pattern, the entire landscape of educational funding completely demystifies. You do not need 75 essays. You only need 3 masterclass narratives. Instead of starting from a blank, intimidating page every single time a new deadline approaches, you are going to engineer 3 foundational master documents based on those 3 core themes. Think of these master documents as the chassis of a high-performance vehicle. The engine and the frame remain exactly the same for every single race, but you are going to strategically swap out the exterior paint, the aerodynamic modifications, and the specialized tires depending on the specific terrain of the application you are tackling that day. In the educational consulting space, we call this the modular essay architecture. Let us look at a highly specific case study from the current 2026 application cycle, featuring a high school senior named Marcus Vance. Marcus possessed a master essay centered entirely around the leadership theme. The core of his narrative, which constituted about 80% of the total word count, detailed a highly specific initiative where he completely reorganized his high school's failing, disorganized peer tutoring program. He wrote a vivid, action-packed narrative about analyzing the scheduling bottlenecks, recruiting reluctant upperclassmen to volunteer their time, and ultimately raising the collective grade point average of the freshman class by a measurable, documented percentage. That central story of leadership, logistical problem-solving, and tangible results was his immovable middle block. It was perfectly edited, ruthlessly paced, and demonstrated immense operational competence. Now imagine if Marcus needed to apply for a highly localized community bank scholarship that specifically emphasized financial literacy, and simultaneously apply for an engineering coalition grant that prioritized systematic thinking and process optimization. A traditional unoptimized student would attempt to write 2 completely separate stories, exhausting hours of highly valuable time. Marcus simply utilized the modular framework. For the community bank application, he kept the entire middle block about the tutoring program completely intact, but he meticulously rewrote the introductory paragraph to focus on how he had to personally manage the tight, $500 operational budget for the tutoring center, heavily emphasizing his careful resource allocation and financial stewardship. He then rewrote the concluding paragraph to explicitly align with the bank's core mission, stating that his hands-on experience managing the program's highly limited financial resources ignited a profound passion for community financial health and sustainable budgeting. For the engineering coalition grant, he used that exact same immovable middle block. However, he rewrote the introduction to frame the failing tutoring program not as an educational issue, but as a complex systems engineering problem. He described his scheduling overhaul as an exercise in optimizing human efficiency and eliminating operational waste within a broken system. His conclusion then pivoted perfectly into his deep desire to study industrial engineering at a 4-year university, so he could learn how to optimize significantly larger civic and corporate systems in his professional future. Marcus submitted 2 radically different applications to 2 completely different selection committees, targeting 2 distinctly different foundational missions, all while utilizing the exact same 600-word core story. He accomplished in 45 minutes what would take an unoptimized applicant 2 entire weeks of grueling creative labor. This is exactly how you mathematically scale your application volume, without ever sacrificing the elite, highly targeted quality of your submissions. To actively build your own modular framework today, you must ruthlessly isolate the top and bottom 20% of your master essays. The introduction must act as the highly variable hook, explicitly designed to catch the unique attention of the specific reader based on their industry. The conclusion must act as the variable pitch, directly tying your core story to the exact verbiage found on the Foundation's official website. This requires a process called keyword extraction. Before you write the variable conclusion, you must go to the Foundation's About Us page and highlight their core values. If the Foundation's mission statement utilizes the word sustainability 3 times on their homepage, you must seamlessly integrate the concept of sustainability into your final paragraph. If they constantly reference grassroots innovation, your conclusion must explicitly position your future career as an exercise in grassroots innovation. The middle 60% of your essay, the narrative core that actually proves your extreme competence and high character, remains completely untouched. Historical trends consistently demonstrate that scholarship selection committees are entirely siloed organizations. The local Rotary Club does not communicate with the Regional Nursing Association, and neither of them communicates with the national corporate sponsor headquartered 3 states away. They will never know that your brilliant narrative about organizing a community food drive, is currently sitting on 3 different desks across the country. They only care that the highly polished document placed directly in front of them speaks intimately and specifically to their highly specific organizational values. By mastering this perfectly ethical copy and paste methodology, you exponentially increase your potential outcomes. You are suddenly able to hit that critical threshold of 75 hyper-targeted applications without experiencing the devastating mental fatigue that entirely eliminates your immediate competition. You are operating less like a stressed high school student and more like an efficient corporate machine, seamlessly deploying highly refined marketing assets across multiple channels simultaneously. You now possess the strategic targeting matrix to find the money, the impenetrable logistical tracking system to manage the deadlines, and the modular essay architecture required to mass-produce elite written applications. You are fully prepared to submit a mechanically flawless digital package. But there is a massive, looming vulnerability built directly into the scholarship process that you currently do not control. Every single lucrative scholarship requires an external endorsement, a third-party validation of your character that can either elevate your pristine application to the absolute top of the pile or instantly drag it down into the rejection bin. You are completely reliant on the letters of recommendation from your chronically overworked teachers, coaches, and community leaders. Imagine if you execute the modular framework perfectly and submit a masterpiece essay, but the teacher you asked simply writes a generic 3-sentence paragraph stating that you are a nice student who turns in homework on time. That lukewarm, uninspired endorsement will instantly kill your chances of securing the funding, rendering all of your hard work completely useless. You cannot leave this critical component to chance, and you absolutely cannot rely on your busy teachers to know how to market you effectively to a private foundation. You must learn how to strategically manipulate the recommendation process so that your recommenders write exactly what the committee needs to hear, which requires executing a highly tactical document known as the strategic brag sheet. The strategic brag sheet is a highly calibrated psychological tool designed to completely eliminate the administrative burden on your recommender while simultaneously dictating the exact narrative they submit to the private foundation. Most students navigating the system in the year 2026 approach the recommendation process with terrifying casualty. They walk up to their favorite instructor at the very end of a chaotic class period, casually ask for a letter to be written, and simply walk away, operating under the deeply flawed assumption that the educator possesses a photographic memory of every brilliant thing the student has accomplished over the past 9 months. This is operational malpractice. You must step back and put yourself directly into the shoes of a typical public high school educator to understand why this casual approach mathematically guarantees a rejection. Imagine if you are an advanced placement chemistry teacher. It is the middle of October. You are currently attempting to grade 150 complex lab reports every single weekend. You are managing mandatory parent-teacher conferences. You are attending district curriculum meetings. And suddenly 45 different highly ambitious seniors approach your desk asking for customized letters of recommendation due in exactly 3 weeks. You simply do not have the cognitive bandwidth or the physical hours in the day to craft 45 highly unique, emotionally resonant, multi-page masterpieces entirely from scratch. Historical trends clearly show that under this immense administrative pressure, educators inevitably default to a standardized, generic template. They open a saved document, change the name at the top, alter a few pronouns, input the specific letter grade the student received in their classroom, and hit print. This is absolutely devastating to your potential outcomes. A scholarship selection committee reading a generic, template-driven letter instantly registers it as a massive lack of genuine enthusiasm. They view a lukewarm endorsement as a polite, quiet warning that the student is merely adequate, completely destroying the highly targeted, exceptional image you just spent weeks building within your modular personal statement. To fundamentally bypass this dynamic, you must transform your request from a massive chore into a seamless, friction-free process for the educator. You accomplish this by handing them the strategic brag sheet in a meticulously organized physical and digital dossier. This is not a basic list of your extracurricular activities or a standard high school resume. It is a targeted, highly structured document that practically writes the letter for them. The very first section of this dossier must explicitly state the exact name of the scholarship, the absolute final operational deadline translated into their specific time zone, and the core foundational values of the organization awarding the money. If the foundation specifically values civic responsibility and ethical leadership, you must explicitly state that reality at the very top of the page so the teacher knows exactly what thematic angle to take before they even begin typing. The second section of the dossier is the critical memory jogger, And this is where you secure the funding. You cannot rely on the educator to spontaneously remember your specific, high-level contributions to their academic environment. You must meticulously document them. You will write out exactly 3 highly detailed, action-oriented anecdotes from your specific time in their classroom. Do not write a vague statement claiming you were a dedicated student who loved chemistry. You must write exactly what happened. You state clearly that during the final titration lab in November, your assigned lab partner was absent, and you successfully managed the entire complex experiment alone, securing the highest yield in the class while actively assisting the group at the adjacent table who is actively struggling with their mathematical calculations. You are handing the teacher a pre-packaged, highly compelling story of operational leadership and academic excellence that they can simply lift directly from your document and insert straight into their final letter. You are doing the heavy lifting for them, ensuring that the specific stories they tell perfectly corroborate the overarching narrative you are already building in your personal essays. Let us look at a highly revealing case study from a student named Emily Carter, who is actively navigating the intense 2026 application cycle. Emily was aggressively targeting a highly lucrative, $10,000 private endowment focused heavily on analytical problem solving and technological innovation within the healthcare sector. She required a letter of recommendation from her senior year physics instructor, a notoriously strict and chronically overworked educator, who was widely known across the district for writing incredibly brief, uninspired endorsements. Emily did not just ask for the letter and hope for the best. She executed the brag sheet protocol flawlessly. She provided a comprehensive dossier detailing a specific instance where she spent 3 weeks independently researching a complex data modeling software just to automate the data collection for her final physics project. She explicitly tied this specific anecdote directly to the technological innovation core value required by the foundation. The result was exactly what the data dictates when you manage stakeholders correctly. The physics teacher, immensely relieved of the burden of brainstorming a narrative, essentially adapted Emily's detailed anecdote word for word into a glowing, highly specific 2-page endorsement that painted her as a generational analytical talent. The foundation later cited that exact, hyper-specific letter of recommendation as the primary deciding factor when they ultimately awarded her the $10,000 check over 300 other applicants. However, handing over the document is only phase 1 of managing your recommenders. You must also establish an ironclad professional timeline. You must deliver this comprehensive dossier a minimum of 4 to 6 weeks before the actual digital deadline. If you approach an educator with less than 14 days of lead time, you are actively communicating that their finite time is not valuable to you, which will absolutely be reflected in the rushed, annoyed tone of their writing. Furthermore, you must employ a highly professional follow-up sequence. You cannot simply hand them the folder and disappear. You must send a polite, digitally tracked email exactly 2 weeks before the deadline, thanking them again for their immense time and gently asking if they require any additional context, specific data points, or further clarification to complete the letter. You are actively operating as a high-level project manager, carefully ushering a highly valuable asset across the finish line without ever appearing demanding, panicked, or entitled. This exact same aggressive protocol applies to external community leaders, athletic coaches, and workplace supervisors. In fact, it is significantly more critical for these individuals because they are rarely accustomed to writing formal academic endorsements. If you are asking the manager of the local hardware store where you work part-time for a recommendation, they will likely be completely terrified of formatting the document incorrectly. Your strategic brag sheet must include a sample structure for them, guiding them to specifically discuss your relentless punctuality, your ability to de-escalate angry customers, and your systematic approach to inventory management. You must help them directly tie those gritty retail skills to the broader concepts of reliability, maturity, and operational efficiency that scholarship committees actively crave. By systematically managing your recommenders through this high-level documentation, you completely eliminate the weakest, most volatile link in the entire application chain. You ensure that every single piece of paper associated with your name, whether written by you or generated by a third party, is violently aligned with one single, undeniable narrative of competence. You have now audited your demographic data, you have built your impenetrable digital tracking matrix, you have engineered your modular essay architecture, and you have flawlessly managed the recommendation ecosystem to produce glowing, hyper-specific endorsements. You bundle the entire pristine package together, you upload it to the portal ahead of the server crash, you hit submit, and you wait. 3 months later, your dedicated professional email account receives an urgent notification. You open it, and your heart immediately drops into your stomach. The foundation was utterly blown away by your paperwork. You are officially a top 3 finalist for a $40,000 full-ride endowment. But there is a massive, terrifying catch. They are not simply mailing you the check based on your documents. To secure the actual funding, you must log into a live, high-stakes video conference next Tuesday and verbally defend your entire application in a highly aggressive, panel-style interview against 5 corporate executives who hold your entire financial future in their hands. Everything you have built on paper is about to be violently tested in real time. And if you stumble, hesitate, or break eye contact during this critical interrogation, the money vanishes instantly. How do you construct an impenetrable psychological defense and physically command the room when the stakes are absolutely life-altering? The absolute first step in constructing this psychological defense is executing a massive internal paradigm shift regarding the power dynamic of the interview itself. In the year 2026, the vast majority of high school students walk into these final round corporate or foundation interviews operating under a severely submissive psychological framework. They sit down, physically shrink their posture, avert their eyes, and behave exactly like a terrified subordinate, begging a panel of wealthy executives for a charitable favor. This is a fatal strategic error. Scholarship committees are not charities. They are highly calculated investment vehicles. They possess a large pool of capital, and their specific institutional mandate is to deploy that capital into human assets that will eventually generate a massive societal, academic, or corporate return on their investment. You must completely eradicate the mindset of a beggar and immediately adopt the psychological posture of a high-value founder pitching a highly lucrative partnership to a room of venture capitalists. When you fundamentally understand that they need your talent, your drive, and your future success just as much as you need their funding, your entire physical presence transforms. You stop apologizing for your youth and start projecting quiet, undeniable authority. To physicalize this authority, especially in the modern landscape where almost all final round interviews are conducted via high-stakes video conferences, you must master the mechanics of digital command. Let us examine a catastrophic case study involving a brilliant student named James Thompson. James had a flawless application and was the mathematical favorite to win a $25,000 regional engineering endowment. However, James took his final interview sitting on his childhood bed, with his laptop resting on his lap. This positioning forced the web camera to look drastically upward at his face, while the bright ceiling light directly above him cast heavy shadows over his eyes. Subconsciously, the panel felt disconnected, visually strained and uncomfortable. Furthermore, when James answered their questions, he stared directly at the faces of the executives on his monitor rather than looking directly into the physical camera lens. To the panel, it appeared as though James was constantly looking down and avoiding eye contact. He lost the $25,000 endowment to a student with significantly lower test scores simply because he failed to engineer his digital environment. To ensure you never replicate this expensive mistake, your physical setup must be weaponized. Your laptop must be elevated on physical books or a stand until the exact center of the camera lens is perfectly flush with your natural eye level. This creates absolute psychological parity between you and the panel. You are looking them straight in the eye as equals, neither submitting to them from below nor dominating them from above. You must position a strong, diffused primary light source directly behind your camera, illuminating your face clearly and eliminating all shadows. Most importantly, you must train yourself to stare relentlessly into the dead, black void of the camera lens whenever you are speaking. It feels entirely unnatural to ignore the moving faces on your screen, but looking into the lens is the only physical way to simulate direct, piercing eye contact with the executives on the other side of the country. This single micro-adjustment in body language instantly separates you from 99% of your competition. Once your digital environment is locked in, you must prepare for the single most dangerous psychological trap in the entire interview process. It is the very first thing they will say to you, and how you respond in the initial 60 seconds dictates the mathematical probability of your success for the remainder of the session. The panel will look at you, smile warmly, and say, "Tell us a little bit about yourself." Historical trends prove that disorganized students completely panic at this vague prompt. They begin rambling chronologically, reciting their high school transcripts, listing their extracurricular clubs, and awkwardly repeating the exact same statistics the panel already read in their application file. The panel immediately zones out, their eyes glaze over, and you have instantly lost control of the room. You must treat this opening question not as a casual icebreaker, but as an explicit invitation to deploy a highly engineered, 90-second elevator pitch designed to seize the narrative framework of the interview. You will utilize the present, past, future architectural model. You begin with the present, delivering one sharp, definitive sentence about exactly who you are and what your current operational focus is right now. You then pivot to the past, offering one highly specific, engaging anecdote that perfectly illustrates the core catalyst behind your academic drive. Finally, and most importantly, you bridge directly into the future, explicitly stating how winning this exact scholarship is the final required piece of leverage you need to execute your long-term professional vision. You finish your 90-second pitch by looking directly into the camera lens and stating that you are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to explore a mutual partnership with their foundation today. You have just set a breathtakingly professional tone, seized the momentum, and forced the panel to interact with you on your terms. As the interview progresses, the panel will inevitably deploy behavioral stress tests. They will ask you to describe a time you failed, a time you dealt with a difficult team member, or a time you had to make an unethical choice. The amateur applicant gives a vague, evasive answer, terrified of looking weak. The fully optimized applicant utilizes the heavily modified STAR-T method: situation, task, action, result, and the critical addition, the tie-back. Imagine if they ask you about a massive failure. You do not offer a fake weakness like claiming you worked too hard. You give them a granular, gritty situation where a project you led actively collapsed. You clearly define the task you were trying to accomplish. You meticulously detail the exact, highly accountable actions you took to mitigate the disaster. You provide the quantifiable result of what you learned. Then you execute the tie-back. You explicitly connect the resilience you built during that specific failure directly to the core values listed on the Foundation's official website. You prove that your past failures make you a substantially safer, more mature investment for their capital today. Finally, as the interview concludes, the lead executive will ask if you have any questions for the panel. Saying no is the final fatal error. It signals a complete lack of intellectual curiosity. You must deploy a highly targeted, reverse-engineered question that forces the panel to sell the foundation to you. You ask them, based on the historical trends of your most successful past recipients, what specific character traits separated the students who merely spent your money from the students who actively amplified your organizational mission? This question completely reverses the psychology of the room. The panel is suddenly forced to lean forward, deeply engage with their own institutional legacy, and subconsciously associate your highly articulate inquiry with their past winners. You execute this entire matrix perfectly. You command the digital space. You deliver the 90-second pitch flawlessly. You dismantle their behavioral traps using the STAR-T method, and you leave them completely stunned with your final reverse-engineered question. You close the laptop. 2 days later, the email arrives. You won. You officially secured a $30,000 private endowment. You jump out of your chair, you celebrate with your family, and you believe the financial war is finally over. But you are completely unaware that a massive, highly legalized bureaucratic trap has just been triggered in the shadows. By winning that private money and reporting it to your university, you have unknowingly activated a deeply controversial institutional policy that allows the college to legally strip away the exact same amount of financial aid they previously promised you. You just worked for 6 months to win $30,000, only to watch the university quietly take $30,000 out of your other pocket. How do you fight back against the devastating practice of scholarship displacement before it completely bankrupts your freshman year? Scholarship displacement is the most fiercely protected, legally sanctioned secret in the entire higher education funding matrix, and it operates entirely in the shadows of the financial aid office. To fundamentally understand how to defeat this bureaucratic trap, you must first understand the clinical mechanics of how universities calculate your value. When you receive an acceptance letter, the institution generates a document outlining the total cost of attendance. This figure includes tuition, room and board, textbooks, and estimated travel expenses. They then subtract your expected family contribution, a number generated by federal algorithms, to determine your exact financial need. The university then builds a financial aid package to meet that need, often utilizing a combination of federal student loans, institutional grants, and work-study programs. The trap snaps shut the moment you win a private, external scholarship and dutifully report that victory to the university bursar. Federal regulations strictly prohibit a student from receiving financial aid that exceeds the total cost of attendance. However, Instead of allowing that private scholarship to replace the high-interest loans in your package, universities aggressively exploit a legal loophole. They use your hard-earned private scholarship money to replace their own institutional grants. Consider a highly revealing case study unfolding right now in the 2026 academic cycle, involving a student named Liam Foster. Liam executed every single step of our operational checklist perfectly. He audited his personal inventory, targeted a highly specific engineering foundation, and successfully secured a massive $12,000 private scholarship. He was ecstatic. His original financial aid package from his state university included $12,000 in institutional grants and $8,000 in federal student loans. Liam logically assumed his new private scholarship would entirely eliminate his need to borrow the $8,000 and leave him with $4,000 extra for living expenses. He reported his victory to the financial aid office. 2 weeks later, he received a revised award letter. The university legally reduced his institutional grant from $12,000 down to zero. They kept the $8,000 in federal loans exactly where they were. Liam spent months writing essays, securing letters of recommendation, and surviving intense interviews, only to mathematically end up in the exact same financial position as if he had never applied at all. He did not win $12,000 for himself. He essentially acted as an unpaid fundraiser, winning $12,000 for the university's operating budget. This practice destroys the potential outcomes of thousands of students every single year. But you do not have to become a victim of this institutional accounting maneuver. You can fight back, and the very first line of defense is completely outside the jurisdiction of the university. You must immediately contact the private foundation that awarded you the money. Philanthropic donors absolutely despise the practice of scholarship displacement. When a local Rotary Club or a corporate sponsor cuts a check, their explicit foundational mission is to alleviate the financial burden on the specific student they selected, not to artificially subsidize the multi-billion-dollar endowment of a massive university. You must schedule a professional phone call with the director of the foundation and politely explain that your university intends to displace your institutional aid. You are going to ask the donor to execute a highly strategic reclassification of the funds. If the foundation typically sends the scholarship check directly to the university billing department labeled for general tuition, the university possesses absolute control over how that money is categorized against your account. You must ask the private donor to alter the disbursement protocol. Ask them if they are legally capable of writing the check directly to you, the student, explicitly designated for unbilled educational expenses. Unbilled expenses include vital operational necessities like off-campus housing, highly specialized computer hardware required for your specific engineering or design major, mandatory laboratory fees, or daily transportation costs. When the money is classified strictly for unbilled technology or personal educational infrastructure, the University Financial Aid Office has a significantly harder time legally justifying the reduction of your core tuition grants. If the private donor is legally restricted by their own tax status and must send the check directly to the university, you immediately deploy your second countermeasure, which is the institutional appeal process. You never simply accept a revised financial aid letter as an absolute, immovable reality. You must initiate a formal request for a professional judgment review. Do not ever walk into the financial aid office and use the word negotiate. Universities are strictly allergic to the concept of negotiation. You are simply asking for a clinical review of your cost of attendance based on newly introduced data variables. You will draft a highly professional, meticulously documented letter to your assigned financial aid counselor. In this letter, you are going to systematically artificially inflate your personal cost of attendance to absorb the new scholarship money safely. The university utilizes a baseline average to calculate student living expenses, but your specific reality is rarely average. You must provide extensive, documented proof that your actual expenses far exceed their generic estimates. If you require specialized medical treatments not covered by the campus clinic, document those exact out-of-pocket costs. If you are a photography major requiring $3,000 in necessary camera lenses just to pass your sophomore curriculum, attach the syllabus and the retail pricing matrix. If you must fly across the country 4 times a year to assist in caring for an aging grandparent, document the historical trends of commercial airline pricing. By successfully proving that your true cost of attendance is significantly higher than their initial calculation, you effectively raise the federal ceiling on your account, creating the necessary mathematical space for your private scholarship to exist without triggering the displacement of your institutional grants. Imagine if you find yourself in a scenario where the financial aid office rigidly refuses to adjust your cost of attendance, citing strict internal policies. You still possess one final, highly aggressive defensive maneuver. If the university insists they are legally obligated to reduce your total aid package to comply with federal overawarding regulations, you must explicitly dictate exactly which pile of money they are allowed to reduce. Do not let them quietly strip away your free institutional grants. You submit a formal, written directive demanding that they apply your new private scholarship dollars directly to the reduction of your federal or private student loans first. You force them to replace the toxic, interest-bearing debt with your newly acquired free capital, while strictly protecting the baseline grants they originally offered you. This requires relentless, annoying persistence. You must call the office every single week, track every single email correspondence, and refuse to back down until the revised award letter clearly reflects a reduction in your loan burden, rather than a reduction in your institutional gift aid. By executing the foundation reclassification strategy, deploying the professional judgment review to expand your cost of attendance, and aggressively dictating the reduction of your loan liability, you systematically insulate your hard-earned private funding from institutional theft. You have successfully navigated the entire logistical, psychological, and bureaucratic gauntlet of the scholarship process. You secured the capital, you defended the capital, and you are officially prepared to step onto campus in the fall with your tuition completely covered. However, even with massive scholarship victories, historical trends show that nearly 60% of fully funded students still face a hidden, catastrophic financial hurdle in the middle of their sophomore year. They realize that while their tuition is paid, their daily operational survival requires liquid cash they simply do not possess. They are suddenly staring at empty bank accounts while trying to pass organic chemistry, leading them directly into the jaws of predatory, high-interest private credit cards. How do you construct an impenetrable monthly cash flow system while attending classes full-time so you never have to swipe a piece of plastic just to buy groceries? To completely insulate yourself from the predatory trap of high-interest consumer debt during your undergraduate years, you must engineer a highly strategic cash flow architecture that strictly protects your most valuable asset, which is your uninterrupted study time. In the year 2026, the traditional narrative pushed upon college freshmen is that if they need spending money, they should immediately secure a part-time job at a local coffee shop, a fast food franchise, or an off-campus retail clothing store. Historical trends prove that this conventional approach is an academic death sentence for students who are actively relying on merit-based scholarships to fund their tuition. When you trade 20 hours a week of your finite physical energy dealing with angry retail customers, standing on your feet, and adhering to rigid corporate schedules that completely ignore your midterm exam calendar, you mathematically exhaust the cognitive bandwidth required to maintain the high grade point average demanded by your scholarship foundations. You might successfully earn $300 a week in liquid cash, but you are actively risking the loss of a $30,000 endowment because you simply do not have the energy left to study for your organic chemistry final. Imagine if you are a sophomore engineering major. You have a massive physics exam on a Tuesday morning. The off-campus restaurant where you work schedules you for a closing shift on Monday night. You are forced to choose between calling in sick and risking termination, or working until midnight, smelling like fried food, and attempting to study complex thermodynamics on 3 hours of sleep. The potential outcomes of this scenario are universally disastrous. To fundamentally avoid this trap, you must exclusively target and secure what are known in academic circles as paid study environments. These are highly specific, deeply coveted on-campus employment positions where the actual operational requirements of the job are so incredibly low that the university is essentially paying you an hourly wage to sit at a desk and complete your own homework. Let us look at a highly revealing case study from a current undergraduate student named Chloe Ramirez, who is successfully navigating her sophomore year in 2026 without a single dollar of credit card debt. Chloe possessed a full tuition scholarship, but she needed roughly $800 a month to cover off-campus groceries, transportation, and specialized laboratory fees. Instead of applying to the chaotic campus dining hall or the bustling student recreation center, Chloe ruthlessly audited the university employment portal for low-traffic, high-downtime positions. She strategically applied for a job as a weekend monitor for a highly specialized, restricted-access graduate architecture computer lab. Because the lab was only utilized by a handful of graduate students, Chloe spent her entire 8-hour Sunday shift sitting at the front desk in total silence. She utilized this uninterrupted, paid block of time to complete her entire weekly reading syllabus and write all of her preliminary essay drafts. She essentially engineered a scenario where the university paid her a steady hourly wage to maintain her pristine 3.9 grade point average. She secured the necessary liquid cash to buy her weekly groceries without sacrificing a single minute of her crucial academic preparation time. To execute this exact strategy on your own campus, you must bypass the highly advertised jobs and hunt in the administrative shadows. You must aggressively target positions at the circulation desk of the least popular library on campus, the front desk of quiet academic departmental offices like the history or philosophy department, or the late-night security monitoring stations for specific dormitory access points. These roles offer the highest return on your investment of time because they allow you to safely double-dip. You are simultaneously earning the liquid cash required for daily survival while actively completing the academic labor required to retain your primary scholarship funding. However, generating an hourly wage is only the first pillar of an impenetrable student cash flow system. The second pillar involves aggressively tapping into the massive, completely unadvertised ecosystem of university microgrants and emergency discretionary funds. Most students operate under the deeply flawed assumption that financial aid is entirely restricted to massive, semester-based tuition disbursements. This is factually incorrect. Historical trends within higher education administration reveal that almost every single academic department, student affairs office, and alumni association possesses hidden pools of capital explicitly designated for student retention and professional development. These funds sit in separate accounts, entirely disconnected from your primary financial aid package, and they frequently go unspent at the end of the fiscal year simply because no student ever bothered to ask for them. Imagine if your laptop suddenly experiences a catastrophic hard drive failure 2 weeks before a major research paper is due. The traditional, unoptimized student immediately panics, drives to a big-box electronics store, and swipes a high-interest credit card to purchase a new $1,500 machine, instantly plunging themselves into consumer debt. The optimized student executes a completely different protocol. They immediately schedule an urgent meeting with the dean of students and their specific academic advisor. They politely yet clearly explain the technological emergency and explicitly ask if the department possesses any emergency retention funds or technology microgrants to facilitate the immediate replacement of the hardware. In a staggering number of cases, universities will quietly issue a direct, non-repayable grant of $500 to $1,000 from a discretionary alumni fund, specifically to prevent a high-performing student from failing a class due to an unforeseen financial emergency. You must treat these microgrants as a highly strategic secondary income stream. If you secure an unpaid summer internship in a major metropolitan city that will significantly advance your career, do not take out a private loan to cover the expensive summer rent. You must systematically email the Career Services Department, the Alumni Network Director, and the head of your specific major, pitching your internship as a massive branding opportunity for the university itself. You explicitly request a professional development stipend to subsidize your living expenses. You ask for travel grants to attend out-of-state academic conferences. You request materials stipends to cover the cost of expensive art supplies or engineering components required for your senior thesis. By constantly asking the institution to fund your operational existence, you violently protect your own liquid cash reserves. Furthermore, to truly master your monthly cash flow, you must leverage the highly valuable academic knowledge you have already acquired and successfully proven. Once you complete your freshman year and secure high marks in universally dreaded prerequisite courses like calculus, biology, or macroeconomics, you possess a highly monetizable asset. Instead of working 20 hours a week at the library front desk for a standard minimum wage, you can transition into high-ticket private tutoring. You are not tutoring college students who have no money. You are targeting the wealthy parents of local high school students who are desperately trying to get their children into the exact same university you currently attend. You position yourself as the ultimate insider, charging a premium hourly rate to teach high school juniors exactly how to pass the specific entrance exams and master the specific essay structures that you literally just utilized to secure your own funding. By combining a low-friction, high-downtime campus job, aggressively pursuing unadvertised departmental microgrants for all emergency and professional expenses, and monetizing your proven academic success through high-ticket local tutoring, you build an absolute fortress around your personal finances. You eliminate the devastating need for high-interest credit cards, you maintain the high grade point average required by your foundational donors, and you sleep soundly knowing your daily operational survival is completely secure. You have mastered the exact mechanics of living as a fully funded, entirely debt-free university student. You have beaten the system at every single level. But then, the absolute worst-case scenario becomes a devastating reality. You are in the middle of your junior year. You experience an unexpected, severe medical crisis, a deeply traumatic family emergency, or simply a semester where the advanced coursework completely overwhelms your cognitive bandwidth. Your meticulously guarded grade point average suddenly drops from a pristine 3.8 down to a 2.7. You check your secure, professional email inbox on a Tuesday morning, and there it is. The official, heavily formal notification from the private foundation that has funded your entire academic journey thus far. Because you failed to meet the strict 3.0 grade point average requirement, your remaining $30,000 in scholarship funding has been officially and immediately revoked. You are suddenly facing immediate eviction from your off-campus apartment and a massive tuition bill you absolutely cannot pay. How do you execute a highly technical, high-stakes academic appeal to legally resurrect a dead scholarship, force the foundation to reinstate your funding, and save your entire college career from total collapse? The moment you receive that devastating email revoking your financial lifeline, your natural human instinct is to completely panic, draft a highly emotional, desperate, and disorganized reply begging the foundation for forgiveness, and hit send within 5 minutes. This is an absolute guarantee of permanent failure. You must understand that private scholarship foundations and university financial aid offices operate as rigid, highly structured bureaucracies. They do not respond to tears, they do not respond to vague promises to try harder next semester, and they certainly do not respond to panicked emails sent at 2 in the morning. They respond exclusively to documented evidence, institutional corroboration, and highly structured corrective action plans. When you fall below the required grade point average, you trigger a highly clinical, automated contractual clause within their system. To reverse that automated decision, you must construct a forensic academic appeal that proves the drop in your academic performance was a mathematically isolated anomaly caused by extreme, unavoidable, and heavily documented external factors, rather than a fundamental lack of intellectual capability or a sudden drop in personal discipline. To fully grasp your leverage in this terrifying scenario, you must understand the psychological concept of the sunk cost fallacy from the perspective of the Foundation Board of Directors. If a philanthropic organization has already invested $30,000 into your freshman and sophomore years, they desperately want you to graduate. If you fail out of the university during your junior year, their initial $30,000 investment yields absolutely zero alumni success stories for their annual corporate impact report. They lose their return on investment completely. Therefore, the board of directors actually wants to approve your appeal, but you have to provide them with an ironclad, heavily documented bureaucratic excuse to legally bypass their own internal regulations. Consider the highly instructive case study of Daniel Evans, a university junior navigating the brutal 2026 academic calendar. Daniel held a $15,000 annual engineering scholarship that required a strict 3.0 grade point average. During his fall semester, he contracted a severe respiratory infection that quickly developed into pneumonia, forcing him to miss 3 critical weeks of advanced calculus and physics lectures. His grade point average plummeted from a pristine 3.8 down to a disastrous 2.4. The foundation automatically revoked his funding the first week of January. Daniel did not send a desperate email. He treated the revocation as a complex corporate dispute and executed a 4-step resurrection protocol. First, he executed a complete forensic audit of his failure. He did not vaguely state that he was sick. He gathered the exact dates of his hospital admission, the official discharge paperwork, and a formal, signed letter from his primary care physician detailing his physical inability to attend class or complete complex cognitive tasks during that specific 3-week window. He treated his medical records like legal evidence in a court proceeding. Second, and this is the step that 90% of students fail to execute, Daniel did not submit his appeal alone. A student defending themselves is inherently viewed as biased and desperate. You must secure massive institutional backing to validate your claims. Daniel scheduled an emergency meeting with the University Dean of Students and his primary academic advisor. He presented his medical documentation and requested that the university formally intercede on his behalf. His academic advisor drafted a highly professional letter directly to the foundation board. This letter verified that prior to the medical emergency, Daniel was operating in the top 10% of his engineering cohort, and confirmed that the university administration fully believed his academic collapse was entirely out of his control. Having a university official vouch for your character carries immense weight with private donors. Third, Daniel engineered a mathematically sound corrective action plan. You can never approach a foundation, hand them a doctor's note, and simply state that you will do better next time. You must provide a granular, operational roadmap of your academic recovery. Daniel drafted a formal document detailing that he was officially dropping his credit load from 18 hours down to 12 hours for the spring semester to permanently reduce cognitive strain. He provided written proof of his enrollment in the University Center mandatory peer tutoring program for 3 days a week. He completely mapped out his academic recovery, proving to the foundation that he had systematically eliminated the variables that led to his failure and built a safety net to ensure it could never happen again. Fourth, Daniel structured the actual ask. He did not demand the immediate return of his full $15,000. He utilized a highly strategic negotiation tactic, known as the probationary concession. He formally requested that the foundation place his scholarship on a one-semester probationary hold rather than executing a permanent cancellation. He asked them to withhold the funds for the spring, allow him to execute his corrective action plan using federal loans to bridge the gap, and agreed that if he did not achieve a strict 3.5 grade point average by May, the foundation could permanently sever the relationship with 0 complaints from him. He offered them a completely risk-free proposition. The foundation board reviewed Daniel's medical documentation, the fierce endorsement from the university dean, and his meticulous operational recovery plan. Because he removed all the emotional desperation and presented a clinical, highly professional case, they unanimously voted to approve his probationary request. By May of 2026, Daniel hit a 3.6 grade point average, and his entire $15,000 endowment was fully reinstated for his senior year. This exact same framework applies even if your failure was not medical. If your grade point average dropped purely due to academic overload, you execute the same protocol. You get your academic advisor to write a letter admitting that they heavily advised you to take an inadvisable course load, essentially shifting the blame to the university infrastructure. You build the corrective action plan showing a restructured major track, and you pitch the probationary concession. You are proving to the board of directors that their initial investment in you was not a mistake, and that you possess the extreme executive function required to navigate a catastrophic life event without permanently derailing your professional trajectory. When you combine this advanced defensive appeal protocol with every single operational strategy we have dissected in this comprehensive masterclass, you become an entirely different caliber of student. You are no longer navigating the massive higher education industry as a passive, terrified consumer. You have learned how to ruthlessly audit your personal demographic data to locate hidden, low-competition funding pools. You have constructed an impenetrable digital tracking matrix that completely eliminates the administrative friction of managing dozens of disparate deadlines. You have mastered the modular essay architecture, allowing you to mass-produce elite, highly targeted personal statements without experiencing creative burnout. You have deployed strategic brag sheets to manipulate chronically overworked educators into writing generational letters of recommendation. You have learned how to command the digital interview space, dominate the psychological power dynamic of a corporate panel, and forcefully protect your institutional grants from the devastating trap of scholarship displacement. You have even engineered a seamless on-campus cash flow system to protect your daily operational survival without sacrificing your study time. You possess the exact historical trends, the proven case studies, and the ultimate operational checklist required to graduate from a 4-year university in the United States completely and entirely debt-free. But here is the terrifying reality of graduating with a flawless resume and 0 student loan debt. The day you walk across that stage and accept your diploma, the academic game officially ends, and the corporate bloodbath immediately begins. You have spent 4 years mastering how to extract free capital from philanthropic foundations, but now you must pivot and learn how to extract maximum compensation from ruthless corporate human resource departments. Most debt-free graduates make a catastrophic psychological error the moment they receive their very first job offer. They look at a baseline salary of $60,000, they feel a massive wave of relief, and they immediately sign the contract without changing a single word, leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars in lifetime earning potential sitting completely untouched on the table. You just won the academic war, but if you do not know the exact, highly guarded psychological frameworks required to manipulate a corporate hiring manager, you are going to lose the wealth-building war before it even starts. How do you take the exact same aggressive leverage you just used on the scholarship committees and weaponize it against a massive corporation to legally force them to increase your starting salary by 20% on day one?